Hey, everybody, welcome to the All Pro Dad, what it takes to excel as a Black father. My name is Shannon LaNier, and I am also a father of three. And we'll play as your moderator today as we get into a great conversation with two other amazing fathers. First off, we have Kenneth Braswell, who is a father of 5 kids. Count them, 5. You beat me, brother. I'm praying for you. But he's also the CEO of Fathers Inc. He has several books out, and he is just an amazing father. He'll be joining this conversation along with Damon Hart. Damon is a senior vice president over at Liberty Mutual and also a father. Damon, don't you have 10 kids? Is that right?
No, not yet. Just 2.
That's enough.
Some days it feels like 10.
Right. Well, I definitely appreciate you both being here for this conversation. And since I'm a father too, I'm going to kind of join you all in this conversation as well as moderate it, because we wanted people to get as much great information out of this as possible. And for those people that are watching, this is sort of like a man's cave, bro talk, where we're just giving you the real deal, the good, the bad, and the ugly of fatherhood. We're going to reveal ourselves as much as possible to really help you understand what it's like being a Black father in 2020, some of the challenges we go through, and some of the grateful things that we actually get to experience every once in a while when our kids run up to us and say, "We love you." One of the best feelings ever. But let's go ahead and start off with the state of fathers and fatherhoods, especially for Black fathers. Damon, we'll start with you. What do you think the state of fatherhood is right about now in this age we're living in?
Well, I think it's obviously a very difficult year. I think that all families are stressed right now. Every member of all families are stressed, and I think as a father, the key is to be really more of a thermostat rather than a thermometer. And what I mean by that is rather than just reflecting the temperature of the household, being the person that sets the temperature. And usually it needs to be turned down a bit, given that everybody's in stress, this year with COVID and so many losses of so many heroes, starting with Kobe and John Lewis and the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and this racial awakening that we're in. And I think that the state of fatherhood is really setting that parameters for what's actually happening, giving some historical context to our children, talking to them about what's going on, and also at some level trying to remain hopeful.
That's so true. I totally understand that. So, Kenneth, what do you think the temperature is right now? Damon mentioned the temperature of this country. What is the temperature reading for you?
Shannon, if I can draw from an old movie, an old Western movie, I think it's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? The good is people are talking about us. People are paying attention to Black fathers. You're starting to see the imagery, and you're starting to see the societal narrative elevate and change a little bit as it relates to fathers. Research is now out there saying that particularly African-American fathers are the most involved fathers of any other cohort of dads in the country. So we're there, we're visible, and we're attempting and we're trying our best to do what we need to do. The bad for many of us in these times, the pandemic and the civil unrest and the economic downturn, for those of us who are not in the economic space to be able to survive all that is coming upon us, it's a struggle, right? The unemployment for young African-American fathers are, higher than any other cohort in the country. There's an eviction crisis about to come upon us for dads who are not being able to pay those bills and keep their jobs. And so that's the bad of it. The ugliness of it is that we're just in ugly times. This is a time that we have not seen in our generations, where we have a pandemic, we have a civil struggle, we have economic struggle, we have all kinds of things that are happening to us all at one time, and it's just a very nasty and ugly time for us as people in this country.
You know, one of the things we can't overlook is the situation that's happening with the police. I mean, you know, my kids are only 9, 7, and 4, and they're already asking questions. So are they our friends? Should we, go to them if there's trouble? And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, you got to try to not talk about generalization and say, for me at least, I'm trying to say, no, the police are here to help you. They're your friends, but not all of them are nice people. Some of them are bad seeds, and try to take it from that perspective. But my son, he wants to be a cop right now. So I can't, shatter his dreams. I say, you can be one of the good cops that are out there helping protect people. And it's like he thinks everybody's superheroes. But so it's like you have that superpower to help people. And so that's one of the things I try to, when I have that conversation with them, is to try to instill, just like all white people aren't bad and just all black people aren't bad. It's just those individual people sometimes aren't the nicest people, and we have to deal with those people on that individual basis. What are you all telling your children about dealing with the police?
I have 4 girls and I have an 11-year-old boy. And we have a new addition to our household, a 13-year-old boy from New York who is now staying with us here in Atlanta. And for me, it's simple character recognition, right? No matter who you meet, you have to be able to determine whether they're good or bad, safe or dangerous. I mean, cops are not the only people in this world that pose a danger for our children. And you have to be able to make them mindful of the world, the activities that are taking place in the world. You have to remind them of the power of who they are, and the ability to be smart when they're away from their adults. And I think you just have to pray to make sure that the voices of their parents turn on in the moments that they need them most, when they're out there in the community.
Right. And what about?
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to just. I think first of all, something that Kenneth said is so apt that we're talking about Black fathers. So kudos to this conference to have a conversation like this. That we're talking about fatherhood. We're talking about Black dads. You referenced the study that was done a couple years ago under President Obama about the involvement level of Black dads. I just think it's a conversation we need to keep having if we're going to change some of these stereotypes about us and us being not present and all of that stuff. So I'm very excited to be here to have this conversation. But I got a 17, or he just turned 18-year-old son who doesn't quite have his license yet, but he's been training and doing his, he's got his permit. So we've had a lot of conversations about when you get pulled over, not if, but when, and what your responsibilities are to de-escalate the situation and get home to us. And I'm a lawyer, so I tell them, look, I got 100 lawyers in my phone that will fight whatever it is. Your job in that moment is to de-escalate and to get home. So it's been very real to me having these conversations in this time. And I also think back, about the conversations we've had over the years. He's actually been in the car when I've been pulled over, and seeing that interaction, and we've had a chance to have that conversation. So Shannon, it's kind of like the birds and bees talk. You kind of have to have it sooner than you expect. Because they're going to see our boys and our girls as older than they are, and I think about my son was born the same exact year as Tamir Rice, and so when Tamir was killed, we had conversations, about a 12-year-old, being shot with a toy gun, so it's kind of been an ever-present discussion. It's not one conversation; it's an ongoing conversation. And one of the things, Shannon, you mentioned from the outset is that, and you mentioned it as well, Kenneth, that, good, bad, the ugly. I mean, one of the good things about the pandemic is we've been home as a family eating dinner every night together and not in a car going from one field to a court to another event. So we've been able to process what's going on at a little bit of a deeper level.
Yeah, Damon, I definitely want to get to the pandemic and how it's changed our lives as parents. Yeah. But before I do that, as a lawyer, what are some of the things that people need to tell their children about dealing with the police? Because I think a lot of people know, tell your kids, cooperate. But, I think a lot of people don't know, have your license, registration, insurance already out, put them on the dashboard, put your hands on the dashboard too, where they can see them. I always tell my kids in my family who are driving age, always tell the police what you're about to reach for so they don't mistake that you're reaching for a gun or anything else. I'm about to reach for my license, even though they're right in front of you. I'm about to reach for my license and hand them to you. What are some of the things that we need to know about adults and kids when stopped by the police?
Well, I think you hit on it. There's it's interesting because you talk to brothers and sisters all over the country. There's little regionalisms in terms of how people show their hands. Like there's some parts of the country you put your hands on the roof of the car, so you're showing your hands. There's other parts where you put your hands out the window so they can see them, and then there's others where you're 10 and 2. I think you need to have that conversation. The other thing is, we've got police in our family. I got a cousin who's a police officer. I also served on a civilian review board, and I got to do some training. And I think the whole thing is about managing the anxiety of the moment and not doing anything that raises the temperature. Things that you talked about, the verbal cues, make a lot of sense in terms of explaining what you're doing and what you're trying to do, and not being confrontational, being deliberative about the situation, nothing to raise the alarm in the discussion. And then, like I said, as a lawyer, there's always time to fight the case down the line. It's really about getting home safe and then, figuring out what actually went down later on.
Yeah, it's important. You want to be alive to fight that case.
Yeah, there's one other thing that I think is important too, and we can't forget this, and that is to make sure that we express to our boys that we, as their fathers and Black men, understand that no, it's not fair. No, it's not fair that you have to do what I'm telling you that you have to do in order to make it home. But the problem is, it is necessary. I often ponder what Emmett Till's parents said to him before he went to Mississippi in terms of making sure that he did not do the things that could get him for the things he was murdered for. And so it always reminds me that this is not a new conversation. This conversation of having to have to talk with our boys is not a new conversation. We have always had to have this conversation, not only with our boys, but with our girls. But since we're talking about boys, we've always had to give them instructions on how to get home safe.
100%.
And like you said, we have to have that conversation with our girls now, obviously, as well. And it's a sad state, but, praying we all get through it safely. Okay, so now let's backtrack to the pandemic, because I think it has changed our lives. I mean, that's an understatement, but as you mentioned, Damon, it really has helped us be more present with our families. Like, well, we can't go nowhere, so you're going to be at home. We are, my kids are loving movie night and game night. We have superhero parties where we all dress up and just party and dance. So how have your lives changed since the pandemic?
You want to take that?
Yeah, I'll come at it from another angle. I'll let Damon come at it from the father angle. I'll come at it from the husband angle, right? Because we often talk about being locked up in the house, with children, but we're also locked down in the house with that other person that we have to live with, right? That often knows, my wife knows night husband, but she's not always clear who day husband is and how I function in the day, or morning husband, or I don't feel like, talking to you husband. Now, though, and vice versa, she's had to adjust to me as well. But the good of it is that I think that we as a couple have become more connected. We are more in sync. We are, someone said to me the other day, that our children today, our younger children that are growing up, will tell the stories on how their parents survived COVID-19. And that we're in full view for them in understanding how do you continue to sustain and thrive in hard times. And we're teaching our children's lessons without even knowing it. And I think one of the most important lessons that we are teaching them is how do you get along with those people that you live closest to and live the most with, and be able to survive, and at the end of the day, at least still like each other.
And that's a good point, because I think a lot of people are now being reintroduced into the people that they married, like, oh, okay, this is who this person is. And you're like having these conversations that you've sometimes never had before because you, like you said, have not been around each other 24/7. Do you have any advice on how you're dealing with that and how you are getting along so well?
Patience, and don't sweat the small things, right? And so I think we all have our own habits about particular things, but they're not things that burn down the barn. Yeah, it may irritate me because you're not on time when I'd like for you to be on time, but I may not have the right demeanor when you want me to have the right demeanor. But those things aren't things that send us to divorce court, right? Those are just things that we are who we are. And as long as they're not deal breakers, we can find a way to survive each other. So I think that patience is one of the things that is critically important for people to get. And then I think the second thing is just appreciation for the person you married or the person you're living with or the person you've had children with, and just appreciating who they are with all of their faults, still at the end of the day, having a high level of appreciation for them being in your life.
Yeah, so true. I just want to see for all those that do survive, all the statistics about the COVID baby, like the baby boom. Like, I'm bored, you bored? Come on. I just think there's going to be some jumping numbers in there. I understand. This is a hypothesis.
It's either going to be that or the divorce lawyers are going to get rich. It's one of the two, So
exactly.
I agree. I mean, I really like what you said about having that appreciation. I mean, I think for me, gratitude is like a superpower, and being grateful for so many things, and even just having a place to be as a family and be together makes me really grateful. And there's so much loss. Everybody's losing something in this pandemic. That's the thing. Some are losing a lot. Some are losing their life. Some are losing loved ones. Some are losing jobs. Everybody's losing something. Some, kids are losing opportunities in sports and events, proms, graduations. Everybody's losing something. And the one thing I would add from the father perspective is that, we have to think about the impact of this given the scope of our children's lives. I mean, I'm in my 40s, right? So this is 1 year out of, 47. Whereas my daughter's 13, 9 months to her is like a 20th of her life. And she's been in COVID for that period of time. So if you have a 3-year-old, a third of their life has been in COVID. So that's something to think about how impactful that is to them. And it was like probably in April, because I'm in Boston, and the pandemic really hit March, April, and May, and now we're getting better. And it was like a total lockdown. And, to your point, Kenneth, like, you don't know how small your house is until you spend 24/7 with the people that live in your house. There's no break, there's no, well, somebody's away at a sleepover, none of that. It's all together all the time. And so trying to carve out your space and, getting outside and getting some time alone is hard. But I think that, we've been able to get through it by kind of recognizing that everybody needs a little bit of extra grace. The patience you mentioned, I think that everybody needs a little extra grace, and that everybody's a little more stressed out, even if they show it differently. And it's interesting. So I have a 13-year-old girl, 18-year-old boy. A lot of what they're dealing with as they're dealing with COVID, those are already tough ages, right? almost 14-year-old girl, there's a lot of stiff arm to daddy. Like, that's just part of the game. And then you throw COVID on top of it. It just, it really cries out for a little more patience.
Yeah, a little bit more patience and a little bit more attention. A lot of times it's like, I want this, especially for the younger ones. So I want to talk about what you guys have done differently during COVID, or learned that you didn't think you were going to have to learn. Like for me, I've been working on my cornrows. I'm a girl dad, hashtag it. So I've been trying to get the cornrows right. And, usually you don't really have enough time. But now through this pandemic, I'm really starting to work on my hair skills. And we've been watching the YouTube videos, and the girls are always coming up with creative things. I want this and I want this. I'm like, take it back. I'm still learning. So what are some of the things you guys have learned during this pandemic or have done outside your comfort zone you thought you would never do? Kenneth?
I really haven't. So all of my girls are out of the house. Only the boys are in the house, and they're young. And so I think what I have learned is to continue to not to fall for the banana in the tailpipe. Like my 11 and 13-year-old, they're into basketball, and I'm not going to be pulled into a competition of trying to play ball with them in the driveway because I've seen too many of my friends snap their Achilles. I am not at my age getting in a cast. That's just not happening. So no matter how much they like prod me, it's like it's not happening. I'm not doing it. And so,
you got to play pig. Just you stay in one spot and just shoot from that spot.
Just shoot threes the whole game. Right. I ain't playing no defense. And so, and I think the other thing is my wife and I have become more conscious about our weight. And so we've gained that COVID weight. And so we're always watching YouTubes and saying, man, that looks like a great workout. What's on TV next? So it's like, we still haven't figured out how to get over, that piece. And I think DoorDash and Uber Eats and all of those things have become bad for us as a family because it's easy to get on your phone and just, order really bad food and eat and go to sleep and wake up the same day and repeat, right? And so there's some things that I've, really have seen in our household as it relates to our boys. But I think that, those things that I struggled with prior to COVID, I struggle with even more during COVID.
That's so true. A lot of people say that the problems were always there. They're just heightened now. Same with the relationships with your spouse. Some of those issues were there. They're just heightened now because now you're there to pick on them more and recognize them more consistently. And we're going to get to that health issue next. We won't talk about that coming up, but I want to give Damon a chance to talk about what he's learned or what's happened to him differently.
Yeah, a couple things. So I learned to kind of step up my game in the cooking in the kitchen realm. We were kind of rotating dinners, who was going to take dinner, the four of us, and that was really fun. But my kids started like taking it to another level. They were doing actual, recipes. And at one point, my daughter said to me, and it was kind of funny. She was like, "Dad, your game is like very limited. You can do steak, you can do, chicken, or you could do pizza, or order pizza. Like you need to expand your game a bit." So I've learned to make a few things, and baking a little bit. Also, Kenneth, to your point, put on the COVID-19 of pounds, trying to work that off a little bit. But I think we've kind of bonded around food and baking a little bit as a family. I've also started watching some shows that, my kids like, but it's funny, like they will watch YouTube for hours. They'll just put on YouTube. It'll be movie after, like video after video after video. So I started to lean into that. There's actually a few YouTube shows that follow these basketball families that are like trying to make it. And, so we've started watching those as a family, which is something I never thought I would do, watch YouTube videos. So that's something I'm learning to do.
Yeah, I'm glad we all brought up food because I forgot. I learned how to cook rice. I know it sounds simple, but I'm not the one who's familiar with the kitchen. I learned how to make rice for the first time. And I've also started to perfect my shredded chicken because I've been doing meal prep. And I believe one of the things to help lose weight, I'm into health and fitness. So one of the great things about trying to lose weight right now is you're home more, so you have time to meal prep. Meal prep, it can be time consuming if you got a million things going on, but it can also make your life easier because you just spend, a few hours making everything for the week and it's already planned, organized, and ready to go. Also, if you're not familiar with macros, try to look up macros and what your macros are. It's how much fat, carbs, and protein you should have within your diet to make it so you're healthier, you're able to lose weight or gain weight, whatever your goals are. But I think health is important because, especially as Black men, I don't think we talk enough about the importance of health. Chadwick Boseman just brought up colon cancer as an important issue because that's what he passed away from. And a lot of people don't even know how to get their colon checked, you know what I mean? And how to get, it's an easy test. You can do it at home. It's not the most pleasant, but you got to get a sample of your stool and, you know, take it, send it in. And it's very easy. You can do it at home, but I think it could save your life, especially if we know about these ailments early enough, then we can catch them. A lot of times we don't even want to go to the doctor. I'm not one of those people. I'm like, oh, let me go to the doctor because I don't want to be surprised later. I want to try to catch whatever it is as soon as it can be caught. So one of the things I try to stress to dads out there, to Black men especially, is to go for your annual checkups. I do it on my birthday, so I don't forget. Oh, it's my birthday. Let me give myself a gift by giving myself more life, by, you know, learning about what my body and helping make sure I can, you know, live longer. And we want to be here for our kids. We want to be there to walk our girls down the aisle. We want to be here to see our kids graduate, have grandchildren, all those things. So it's important that we take care of ourselves and get those checkups, get those physicals, and try to take care of ourselves as much as possible. So I just want to put it out to you all to, you know, any other checkups, you guys, the prostate and all those things you want to make sure people check up on, or any advice for guys, or just kind of encouraging words to get them to the doctor.
I just went today. I had a physical today, and it was, you know, it's extensive. It was, you know, very in depth, and gave me some things to look out for. And I think it's really important. And you mentioned, you know, Chadwick Boseman, when he passed, that was just another hero. You know, he shows that even superheroes are vulnerable. And I text like my cousins, my brothers, when he passed, I was like, y'all need to go get checked. And I told them, I said, I got one scheduled in a couple weeks. Y'all need to get checked. We need to be that kind of accountability on each other as men. And, you know, the other point is, you know, we're talking about fatherhood. That's a good example for our kids, you know, that we're trying to take care of ourselves. We probably all have things that we want to do better. We want to lose this. We want to get stronger. We want to do all that. But for our kids to see us leaning into that and taking care of ourselves and trying to do better is really important, you know, for them to see, for their life and their health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the other element of health that we have to be mindful of is our mental health. Right?
Yes.
And so, you know, I recognize all of those other things in my life that I have to, you know, pay attention to. Pre-COVID, you know, I was diagnosed with high blood pressure, and good thing, as a result of COVID, I'm eating too much, but I'm not eating bad. And so my pressure has gone down significantly, and I've gotten everything back into normal. But it's that mental health, that self-care for Black men and Black fathers, you know, making sure, you know, that we're checking in with people and we're not isolating ourselves, and we're paying attention to our stress levels, and not being depressed, and reaching out. You know, one of the things that COVID has done for us is it kind of has brought us into smaller circles where we're not socializing as much anymore, and we're not connecting with people as much as we used to. Our accountability partners aren't as close. So I'm not going to dinner with my boys as much as I used to. I'm not, you know, hanging out and doing cookouts and those kinds of things. And so it's that mental health component, you know, particularly given all of the civil unrest and all of the things that are going on with all of our communities, but specifically for Black men, you know, staying off of social media and allowing social media to get sunk into your psyche, and you're just continuing to bombard your psyche with the imagery of what's taking place, unfortunately, to our men around the country. And so I think that it's critically important that as we think about our health, that I think we have to think equally about our mental health and our physical health.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was going to add that. I mean, one of the things I've been doing is meditating, and the deep breathing exercises. Those have been really key to keep the stress down, keep the blood pressure low. And I love what you talked about in terms of connection. You know, I think it's more important as we're seeing all these terrible things unfold to process with guys that we trust, and kind of talk it through, and also make sure that, you know, everybody knows a couple brothers that, like, they're worried about. You know, we need to stay in touch with them and make sure that they're doing okay, make sure they know that we care, make sure they know that we're there for them. I think you're absolutely right. I think the mental, especially this year in 2020, which is, you know, essentially, you know, I saw something that said it's basically like 1918 1929, 1968, all in one year, and really all in 9 months of a year, because of everything that we're seeing. And the other thing that I think is a good strategy is I take a news fast. I stop watching the news continuously. I just stop. I probably watch the news once every other day, just to stay up on things. But that kind of constant reel of parade of difficult, horrible things is not good for your mental health.
Yeah, as a news anchor, sometimes I wish I could take a news break, but unfortunately, I don't get that option.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I do try to make sure my kids do is, get that social media break and take that away. But that's one of the things I'm struggling with is, when we talk about mental health and protecting my children's mental health, what do you guys do, especially because some of your girls are older, about the social media and the bullying and helping them have confidence in themselves? You know what I mean? Because it's like you always want to build your kids up. You don't want them to be depressed. You don't want them to have bullies pick on them. But they're dealing with it at younger and younger ages, and now they got this virtual learning, and people are slipping things in the chats even. So how do you guys deal with the emotional state of your children and protecting them, especially in the age of social media?
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because I tell you, my boys both play basketball. So as a result of it, they couldn't play basketball. They're just now beginning to have practices and playing in games. And fortunately, where they're playing, everybody is keeping safe. But what we struggled with, a couple of months ago when this thing was really in the thick was just managing, to your point, that social media or that PlayStation and Xbox time, right? Because there was a gray line in our house with respect to time. There were days that I didn't even know what day it was. My wife would say, honey, today is Wednesday. I'm like, it's Wednesday? I'm like, wow, I just lost a whole day. Like, what happened to the day? And that's because everything in our house just became continuous. And so it was difficult to pay attention to work-life balance. The boys are up at 11, 12 o'clock at night, and they're on PlayStation, and they're playing 2K14, and they're playing Fortnite, and they're online with 7 or 8 others of their friends, where their parents are contemplating the same things, which is our kids have to socialize, right? We can't keep them locked up in the house all day and not have them socialize. So as much as we want to protect them from social media and technology, for these young children, technology is integrated into their lifestyle. They can't function without being on their phones and on their PS4s and their PlayStations. So we've just had to be diligent with, as parents, and go back to some of the old school things like, no, your room door cannot be closed while you're playing on PlayStation. No, you cannot wear headphones when you're doing live and there's several other people on the line. Yes, I will check your phone every now and then to see what kind of messages are coming through and who you're talking to, and really helping them understand that you're not trying to be invasive on their privacy, but at the same time, you're being mindful that while you are young, you still don't have the capability to understand some of the deviousness that can happen in the world, and that it is my job as a parent to ensure that I protect you as much as possible from that.
Good point.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think it's a really good point about the loss of sports. My kids are very active. My son's a basketball player. My daughter's a track athlete and a basketball player, and they haven't really been able to compete this year much at all. And I think that, what fills that place, it's sedentary things like video games and social media and all of that. So there's a mind-body component for them that's missing, and especially if you got a bunch of younger boys, they're rambunctious, they need to move. There's something kinetic about boys. So I think kind of recognizing that, being a little sensitive to it and trying to figure out different strategies. The other thing I figured out, and more to your point, Shannon, is about the social media with girls, is that there's moments where they'll let you in, and you've got to recognize that moment and seize it and have that conversation no matter what. And then there's moments where they don't want you in their business, and you respect that a little bit, and then circle back later, make a mental note. I want to see what's going on, because there would be days where there would be bad moods exhibited in our house, and I didn't know what was the key to it. Was it the fact that you were up all night playing video games? The fact that you're just mad because you're not doing what you want to do right now? Did something happen online? So I made a mental note, circle back a little bit later, have a conversation, and usually you can get to the bottom of it. But it's kind of picking those spots.
You make a good point, because you talked about how they'll let you in at those moments, and I try to jump on those moments. I'm just like, so my 9-year-old starting to ask about sex already at 9 years old. Yeah. Okay, I can do this. So, so we got a book. American Girl has a good book out where it talks about, babies don't come from the stork and stuff like that. And so we're reading this book together and having this opportunity to have these conversations. I never thought I would have to have it at 9, but I think it's important that us as parents, and not just let mom have the conversation, that they hear it from the dad's perspective as well, but to have these conversations, because if we don't have it, their friends online, their friends at school, they're going to have the conversation for them, and you don't want it taught in the wrong way. So I'm trying to intervene, take that window of opportunity to say, okay, you want to talk to me about it? Let's go in. Ask me anything you want. So I'd rather you get it from me than get it from a Google search, and you're looking at all these other things that popping up, and all of a sudden you're confused and you don't understand things. So I just encourage, as mentioning that, to take those opportunities in that window to, just to be as, I guess, comfortable to have those difficult conversations with them, whether they're boys or girls in your family.
Yeah, Shannon, you bring up a really good point. I mean, I think almost every conversation that I've had in the last few years, I felt like it was earlier than I expected. The sex conversations, these conversations about what's going on in the world, the conversations about, hey, son, you're a tall black boy. They're going to see you as a grown man. They're going to fear you. Those conversations all come earlier than I had expected. So I think as a dad, whatever you think of you at that age, you need to add about 2.5, 3 years. So if you're talking to a 13-year-old, think of yourself at 16, literally. If you have 11-year-old, think of yourself at 15. Think of yourself at 14. And in terms of what they've been exposed to, in terms of what they've seen, in terms of, what pops up on, internet searches or even just in their feed, they're seeing it. So I think 100%, it's our job to kind of take the lead and be out there and have the conversation, even if it's uncomfortable. And I love the idea of getting a book to help too. That's a great resource.
What's a piece of advice you would give yourself that can also help other dads before you had kids? So before you had kids, what piece of advice you wish you would have known that you now would give yourself? And hopefully other dads can learn from this as well.
Well, I had heard it before when my kids were little, just how fast it goes. And I'm really feeling it right now. It does go very, very fast. It's very intense. But I feel like I've stayed the same. I've stayed the same age, but my kids have continuously gotten older. So that's one piece of advice, that it really does. You really need to train your mind to enjoy whatever phase, whatever moment they're in. I found myself looking at pictures of my kids when they were little and watching little videos, and I'm like, shit, wiping away tears, because I'm like, I want them to be them little kids again. So it does go really fast. The one other thing I think is really important, and it doesn't matter what situation you're in terms of, your family situation, whether you're, an intact family, or your family is kind of spread out, or you have some different arrangements. I think that this game of being a dad is not a solo game. I think you need a squad. You need guys that are a couple steps ahead of you, that have gone through it, to help you through it. So if you're in a divorce situation, or you're not with the mother, talk to some brothers that that have navigated those waters well. Ask them, to help you, what their advice is, and if you can come back to them with questions as you go along, because there's a lot of wisdom, and we got to be humble enough as men to say, hey, brother, can you help me with this? And, most of the time you'll get really good advice, lived experience.
All right, great point. Kenneth, in 15 seconds, what's your advice?
15 seconds, slow down and be available. Savor life, savor the moment. Really take time. I watch my children like a slow motion movie. Whatever they're doing, I just slow down and enjoy the moment that they're in, and enjoy the moment being a parent, watching them grow into who they'll ultimately become. And then be available where you cannot be present. Just make sure that your children always know that whatever they're going through, whatever they need, that you're always available.
All right, great advice. And mine as we leave would be grace. Grace for you because you will mess up and you need to forgive yourself and move on, try again. Grace for your kids because they're going to get on your last nerve, and give them a little grace. And grace for your wife as well. And a helping hand. A lot of times we think that the wives have it. You got it, you good. No, help your wife. Be there with her. Take the kids out for the day. Give her some breathing space. She needs self-care and me time as well. So a little grace and a little help goes a long way. And gentlemen, thank you so much for that great conversation. It was just spirited. It was fun. And hopefully it helped a lot of people. The All-Pro Dad is in the building, and hopefully more dads will be All-Pro Dads as well. Damon and Kenneth, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. It was an honor.